Now in today's video, we're going to take a look at my favourite transfer targets ahead of Game Week 23. And of course, with the double game week coming up for Liverpool and Everton in Game Week 24, we're also going to talk through my favourite assets that will be doubling in that game week. Now, before we dive into today's video, of course, if you do enjoy any of the content that you see on the channel, please be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as we are trying to hit 12,500 subscribers by the end of the season. And like I said, it is only possible with your guys' amazing support. As you can see on screen right now, we have the Fantasy Football Hub projected data and clean sheet odds for the Game Week 23. I always like to include this in my transfer targets video. Look just towards the next game week, obviously which players we need to probably be looking to sell and which ones that, you know, we want to be looking to bring in just for that one game week. Sometimes we can get confused, obviously, with double game weeks, blank game weeks, everything coming down the line. Sometimes it does help certain managers just to break it down into that one game week period. Obviously, Newcastle against Southampton, a really delicious fixture, and they'll be looking to bounce back after their disappointing result today against Bournemouth. Liverpool against Ipswich and Arsenal against Wolves, we're probably going to be expecting a lot of goals in that one. As well, with Liverpool obviously having the double game week in 24, I feel this is the ideal hop on point, with Ipswich a great green fixture in 23 as well to accommodate that. Wolves following the double as well, so a pretty nice kind of run there of free fixtures. Like I said, this is probably going to be the ideal hop on point for most people to be looking to jump on. Spurs against Leicester, we're going to talk a little bit more about Spurs in today's video, but I think maybe they could be a team as well from an attacking standpoint over the next few weeks that you could also potentially start to look at as well over the next few weeks, with some really interesting fixtures coming up for them. Let's then go ahead and take a look at the 11FI data. Obviously, if you want to go and check out their amazing website, feel free to. There is always a link in the description. Starting off first with the clean sheet data. Unfortunately, it doesn't include the double game week for Liverpool or Everton, which is a little bit disappointing. So hopefully maybe they update that over the next few days. But as you can see, Liverpool and Arsenal, the two best teams for XG conceded so far this season, sat first and second. No real shocks that they're kind of the teams that are pulling away over the next few game weeks as well. So obviously with that double in 24, I think, you know, the next few game weeks for Liverpool, ideally defensively, could be a really good investment. That's Alisson, Trent, Virgil van Dijk, Konate. I feel those all could be worthwhile investments with decent clean sheet odds here, as you can see. Chelsea, I'm a little bit unsure why they're so high on this list. There's not too many kind of strong weeks there, and I think Chelsea overall as well have been very disappointing from a defensive standpoint, so I probably wouldn't be going near them. Fulham, some really interesting ones. Maybe if you haven't bought into Anthony Robinson yet, it could be an ideal time, but I do feel with double game weeks coming up, we probably want to be prioritising our transfers in that regard, rather than maybe looking at the other ones as well. As you can see, Everton already have a 41% chance of a clean sheet in match day 24. You factor in another game in there as well, it is probably going to be looking pretty decent for the Toffees coming up as well. So the likes of Mikalenko, Pickford, Tarkowski, Branthwaite could all be very decent options. Obviously, their attacking numbers, and as we'll come on to see from the 11FI data as well, not really too interesting over the next few weeks. Brighton have also got a pretty decent run, but I think again defensively they've left a lot to be desired this season, so I probably again wouldn't be looking to invest in them. Same goes with Manchester United. Despite them being quite high up on this list, I probably still would probably avoid all United players, bar probably Ahmed at most cost, to be honest. Let's move on then. Let's take a look at the projected goals. Again, doesn't include the double game weeks, which is a little bit frustrating, but as you can see, Liverpool in 23 and 25 with some decent projected data already. Then you factor in that double game week as well. It honestly feels like the right ideal time to be hopping on the Liverpool assets. Of course, we're going to be covering those in more detail within today's video as well. I spoke about Spurs earlier in the video and said obviously they've got some good numbers coming up. As you can see, a brilliant fixture against Leicester in 23. They've also got some pretty decent fixtures following that, playing some of the worst teams for expected goals conceded. It was covered in my FPL Expert series last week, where we spoke about Dominic Solanke and potentially investing into Spurs. They're yet to play in 22, so let's see how they get on in that one first. But likes of Dominic Solanke, Son, Brennan Johnson, Kulusevski, all could be maybe options to consider as well over the next few weeks. We're seeing a drop-off in terms of Manchester City's numbers, so I do feel if you do have Erling Haaland, now is probably going to be the game week to offload him. Of course, I think, you know, despite what he does in the Ipswich game, they've then got Chelsea, and then they're facing some really difficult sides. Liverpool, Newcastle, I think they've got Nottingham Forest as well in there, so they're coming up against some of the best teams for XG conceded this season. So yeah, I probably would be a little bit worried. We're starting to see maybe maybe a few Newcastle assets dry up probably post game week 24, so that's probably going to be the period where a lot of us maybe look to hop off Anthony Gordon and start moving elsewhere with our midfield slots as well. And then Bournemouth, obviously they absolutely demolished Newcastle today, and I know people are going to be looking at their assets. As you can see, probably the ideal hop-on point is going to be 25 when they do face off against Southampton. They're going up against Liverpool and Newcastle within the next two and Forest, within the next 2 game weeks. Not an ideal hop-on point for me, again, personally. Brentford as well, going to be a really interesting team from 23 onwards as well, with some decent projected data coming up for them. Brian Mbeumo, Johan Visser, probably 2 players I would be looking at from that side as well. As you can see, the numbers for Everton are disappointing despite a double game week on the horizon. And yeah, overall, I do feel Everton as a side probably not worth looking at investing in their attackers unless Moyes can maybe get something out of DCL and die. But at the moment, they still seem very fragile, still seem very stale. And for me personally, not worth any sort of investment within that front line. Let's move on then. Let's keep this train rolling and head into the attackers. We're going to start off with the boys that lit up Saturday afternoon. Starting off first with Kluivert, his second Premier League hat-trick of the season. Imagine saying this, right? The player has scored 2 Premier League hat-tricks and has been in nobody's teams. That's Justin Kluivert this season. And he's doing actually really, really well this year. If you look at his data over as well, over the past 5 game weeks, it's pretty good. Obviously on penalties, and I do feel with the Bournemouth injury situation at the moment, he's actually pretty nailed. Usually I'd probably say I wouldn't really go there because of all the other options they've got. They've got so much depth and quality within kind of that free behind the striker. However, with the injuries that they are sustaining at the moment, Justin Kluivert could be a decent option. Now, I don't think 24-3 is going to be the ideal hop-on point. Nottingham Forest and Liverpool, both pretty good sides. Both very, very good at defending as well. Very, very, very resolute sides. And you can see that when you look at the XG conceded chart. So I don't think that's going to be the ideal hop-on point. I do feel it is going to be Southampton and the run following that. Probably up until 30 maybe when you'll start wildcarding. But that for me does feel like the ideal hop-on point to go and do this. However, with the way that Iraola sets up his sides to go and press, be the aggressors and obviously let the other sides have the ball, it might not be the worst idea to maybe go and bring in for Liverpool or Forest. I know they're not the ideal fixtures on paper. However, when you get a team that's set up that way and obviously looking to hit teams deep in their own half when they're trying to possess the ball, that might suit them these harder games against Nottingham Forest or Liverpool rather than your Southamptons, who realistically can't really string a pass together. However, like I said though, I do like to play for the fixtures, and I do feel that hop on point, if you are looking at any Bournemouth assets, of course, is going to be game week 25, and I do feel Kluivert will potentially be quite high up on people's shopping lists as well, with of course him having penalties, with the injury situation and his recent form as well that he has shown. A Premier League hat-trick 2 this season, which is absolutely ridiculous, all before Bukayo Saka as well. Who would have ever thought it? Let's move on to the man on the right. It is going to be Kluivert Mateta. I'm absolutely devastated I didn't bring this man in game week 21. It was my plan to bring him in for Nicholas Jackson. I really, really wish I did it. I could see that they were going up against some of the worst sides for XG conceded. I kind of just was like, no, I need to bank the transfers, I need to play for the double game week, and it hasn't really worked out so far. Maybe the double game week can pull it back for me, but yeah, a mega haul from him today as well. Free bonus, 2 goals as well. They're going up against Brentford and Manchester United, 2 more teams that are pretty horrific defensively as well. I think the Everton game he might potentially struggle. They're still looking pretty resolute under Moyes so far, but obviously they're struggling at the other end of the pitch. But yeah, I think as a set of 3, if you wanted to bring him in, fair play. After that though, probably not ideal fixtures, and like I said, you probably are going to be maybe tempted with somebody like a Gakpo in that striker era, or maybe a Darwin Núñez after his performance today, of course, with Liverpool's double game week going. But I do feel if you want to get Mateta, this is probably going to be the final game week to do it. Brentford conceded 3 XG against City. They're absolutely woeful at defending. Same with Manchester United as well. You hope Yeri Loro plays in that one, because honestly, he's pants. Genuinely pants, and Mateta would rip him apart as well. We know what he's capable of. We saw that at the back end of last season as well. On penalties when Eze isn't on the pitch, and even sometimes when Eze is on the pitch, he still manages to nab them off for them. So ideally, I think Kluivert, you're probably going to be looking at 25. If you were to bring in Mateta, now is the time to do it rather than later. Let's keep the good vibes going and head into the Liverpool double game week players. Obviously, if you've been living under a rock, Liverpool do have a double game week in 24 and of course decent fixtures in 23 and 25. Obviously Ipswich and Wolves as well. And what I've done here is highlight my favourite Liverpool assets and which ones I am potentially considering ahead of the double game week. Of course, we've got their expected goals per 90, their predicted points from Fantasy Football Hub over the next 3 weeks, and of course their goal involvements as well. So let's first off start off with my favourite player. I think Trent Alexander-Arnold. I watched the game against Brentford today. He was so good to watch, genuinely so good to watch. It's a shame Darwin got that second for Trent owners because obviously he would have picked up the free bonus as well. Liverpool obviously still looking very, very strong defensively as well with their good XG conceded numbers as well. I see these fixtures as well as being really, really good opportunities. We saw on the 11-5 data, great clean sheet odds, great attacking data as well that didn't even factor in the double game weeks as well. As you can see, 0.37 expected goal involvement per 90 for a defender is ridiculous, and the Fantasy Football Hub model as well has him top for predicted points over the next few weeks. I think if you can find a way to go and get Trent Alexander-Arnold in, he probably is going to be the best Liverpool asset aside Mohamed Salah for this double game week. So for me personally, that is probably where I would be looking in terms of my investments. I would rather have him over Virgil van Dijk as well. As you can see, there's not too much difference in terms of their price, and if you look at the data that they're putting up and the predicted points from the model as well, we're seeing a huge gulf between obviously Trent and Van Dijk. So I think if I could find those extra funds to go for that, I would personally go and get Trent Alexander-Arnold in rather than Virgil van Dijk. Of course though, with Liverpool, key caveat, they do of course have Champions League football midweek, so of course just make sure before you go and bring any of these players in that they do make it through their Champions League tie in midweek and obviously get rested and rotated and see who plays full 90s before of course bringing them in ahead of the Ipswich game. I thought Konate was absolutely stupendous today, kept Visser and Mbeumo very, very quiet. They tried to burst through him and he was just super strong and effective. I think that will impress Slot a lot. 5.1 million, of course, he's going to be the budget option if you can't stretch yourself to a Trent Alexander-Arnold in that back line. Of course, you do have Alisson as well. If you are looking in terms of adding a Liverpool defender, you could go for the goalkeeper route as well. I don't mind that. He had to be called into action a few times and was very, very comfortable with his saves. But in terms of the defenders, Trent's my number one. Then I'd probably go Konate, then Alisson, then Van Dijk in that order for me personally. And I would rather say this, I would rather have Trent Alexander-Arnold over any of the Liverpool attackers right now. There's just too much rotation. There's too many fixtures coming up as well, where I don't think it makes sense for them to justify me kind of taking a little bit of a gamble or a risk on any of them. We've seen with Luis Diaz, I know he's got the most goal involvements on this list, but we've been seeing slowly over the past few weeks more and more early substitutions, getting subbed off early, not really delivering the goods when he's been playing as the number 9 as well. As you can see, the predicted points kind of reflect that as well. Less than Van Dijk, less than Trent Alexander-Arnold, less than Cody Gakpo as well. So again, probably not going to be a player I would be going and picking up. Gakpo does look like the second nailed attacker outside of Mohamed Salah on that left-hand side. He does seem like a firm favourite of course, Arnie Slot. And I think that's reflected in terms of the predicted points. The Fantasy Football Hub model probably agrees with that statement as well. However, yeah, it's just one of those. I think if you want to maybe take a punt, maybe if Jackson doesn't deliver against Wolves, you want to go for, you know, a double game week player, then maybe Gakpo, could be the one. But again, the amount of fixtures that Liverpool have got coming up, of course, the double game week in 24 is spread out over 12 days as well, where they'll play an FA Cup game and a Carabao Cup game in between that as well. So there's just a lot to kind of consider with it all, to be honest, and I just don't think, personally, any of the attackers are going to be as valuable as Trent Alexander-Arnold. As you can see, you're paying the same price for Trent as you are for Gakpo, and you're getting more predicted points. The data's not even, like, far apart for an attacker and a defender. Factor in clean sheets, factor in Liverpool's strong defensive numbers as well. All of it is, for me, is pointing towards going and picking up a Trent or a Konate, in my opinion. Then finally, Darwin Núñez. I know we're probably going to get some questions asked about him, with of course him scoring in the right at the death of the Brentford game. Probably means that he might get a run out ahead of Diaz. Maybe Champions League might be the way to go with him, but still, before he scored his 2 goals, he had a few iffy moments. Classic Darwin. Probably should have got sent off as well right at the end. Had a very, very risky yellow card. I don't think it's going to be worth even considering Darwin Núñez unless he starts to put a string of quality performances together. Maybe in the Champions League he bags himself a hat-trick. Maybe against Ipswich as well he looks good. Maybe that leads to, of course, Arnie Slot, like I said, playing him in the double game week. But for me right now, he is not going to be an FPL asset I would be considering. Let's move on then to the other side of the double game week. It is, of course, going to be Everton. And right now there are only 2 players I would be considering from Everton. It is going to be Jordan Pickford and it is going to be Mykolenko. These are the only 2 that I think really have any sort of value. Tarkowski and Branthwaite are too expensive. Ashley Young's not bad, but I think you can get Mykolenko for about 0.4 cheaper anyway. Not the ideal fixture to go and bring him in with Brighton away. Obviously pretty decent attack, but of course, you know, then you're getting Leicester and Liverpool at home. But yeah, they're probably going to be the team, if any, that I would be looking at ahead of this. The only 2 players I would be looking at. Like I said, they've been very, very toothless, and I think the 11-5 data shows that as well. If you look at their expected goals created as well so far this season, a very toothless attack, but a pretty solid defence as well. Unless something changes dramatically within the next 2 games, obviously the game in 22 and the game against Brighton. For me personally, I am not going to be considering any Everton attackers and probably only going to be looking at Pickford and Mykolenko. Tarkowski and Branthwaite, like I said, probably have priced themselves out of being any sort within any sort of selection for me and my own team. Let's finish up today's video then and take a look at the predicted points for the next 5 game weeks from Fantasy Football Hub. Of course, Mohamed Salah is going to be clear at the top with the double game week coming up for Liverpool. I feel if you do have that triple captainship left, it is the ideal time to go and play it. We're seeing a drop in terms of predicted points as well for Erling Haaland. So obviously, like I said, with the difficult fixtures coming up, the drop in terms of goal involvements on the 11-5 model as well, probably after this week is going to be the ideal time to sell him. We're seeing, of course, Alexander-Arnold, more points than Gakpo, more points than Virgil van Dijk, more points than Becker, more points than Luis Diaz. So like I said, for me personally, it does feel like a really worthwhile investment. And of course, if you are looking for cheaper midfield options as well, Ahmed could be a decent one that could definitely free up some funds to, of course, go and maybe enable you to go and get Trent Alexander-Arnold in. 2 players that I haven't covered in today's video, but Brian Mbeumo and Visser, we saw right at the back with the 11-5 data a switch in 23 in their fixtures, obviously starting to look more favourable from an attacking standpoint, so they're definitely going to be on the menu as well, both Brian Mbeumo and Visser as well. I think they've both looked pretty good in the City and Liverpool games, probably been a little bit unfortunate in both of those as well, but they have looked pretty decent. And then Dominic Solanke as well. I did say, you know, of course, with the good fixtures coming up for Spurs, the really, really good projected goal involvement, maybe it could be worth considering some of their attackers. But yeah, it's just Dominic Solanke. He doesn't get too many bonus points. Of course, doesn't really convert all his chances for Spurs like he did for Bournemouth, and he's just not the same talisman, is he, when he was obviously playing for the Cherries. That is going to conclude our transfer targets video for today. Of course, if you did enjoy any of the content, make sure you're liking, commenting, subscribing, all that good stuff, and I will see you in the next video.